Welcome back. The issue of child sexual abuse remains a pressing concern in Namibia, with the recent tragic incidents involving the rape and murder of young girls in Okahandja, leaving the nation in shock. Many Namibians are grappling with the question, what kind of individual would commit such a cruel act against a child? Commissioner Emma Nafuka, who holds a PhD in psychology with a specialization in forensic psychology, dedicated her doctoral research to examining the psychological profiles of adult child sex offenders in Namibia. She now joins us via Zoom to provide deeper insight into this complex subject. Dr. Nafuka, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Roundup.
Thank you.
Well, to start with, Doctor, your study highlights a disturbing pattern when it comes to child sexual abuse cases within the country. So what do you believe are the key social or, systematic factors enabling this plague to persist?
Okay, we have to realize that, like the study indicates, child sex offenders, an average age is 30 years old. So we have to realize that today's child sex offenders were probably bred 30 years ago. So that means if there are systematic factors such as unemployment, such as low level of education, dysfunctional family that actually cause the current sexual offending. So if we're looking at current crimes, we have to understand what are the systematic issues, the prevailing issues in our society that exist that actually breed criminality. So it's not enough for us to just think about, we can talk about, or we can have demonstration about sex offending and say enough is enough, we are going to come. But if this systematic dysfunctionality still exists, we can never adequately address sex offending, including any type of crime.
Yeah. Your research found that most offenders were not biologically related to their victims, but were acquaintances. So what does this say about the environments in which children, become most vulnerable?
It tells us that a lot of time our kids are left unattended, and that there's a lot of kids roaming around the street with no parental guidance. But it also tells us that our concept of guiding our kids against stranger danger is actually a misconception. A lot of time kids are harmed by people who they know, because not only did even the perpetrators in the study confirm that the kids knew who they were. So that means it was actually easy for these perpetrators to move the child from point A to point B because they were not strangers to the child. So what does that mean? It means that as parents, there's a lot of issues that we need to put up. Proper parenting, but also not every person that the child meets generally he has got clear, good intention for the child. So this emphasizes, in all honesty, just parenting styles, that we need to make sure that our children are well. There's always parental supervision at all times. I know sometimes yeah?
Doctor, sorry, I just want to ask, out of interest sake, how many case studies did you use for this research?
I looked at about 183. Yeah.
You distinguish between criminally motivated and pedophilic child sex offenders. So can you elaborate on why understanding this difference is vital for, maybe prevention and rehabilitation strategies?
Yeah, it's quite important because every time there is a perpetrator who sexually offended a child, it's more natural that a lot of people assume is a pedophile. But that's not the case. We need to look at the mode of operandi. What did the person do before? What did the person do at the commission of the crime and after? That gives us the motive, or at least the understanding or at who we are dealing with. That is particularly very important for treatment, because a pedophile has got a clinical disorder which needs to be treated, and is a psychological condition. But a criminal child sex offender has another criminal, but is more like, he is just more criminally minded. he doesn't have sexual interest in children. So what you are going to do when you have to work with this offender, you are treating criminal mentality. But when you're working with a pedophile, child sex molester, you are treating actually sexual preference toward children. And this also tells about their recidivism rate. When we look at the criminally motivated child sex offender, they have a higher chance of being rehabilitated because if you just reduce the factors that cause them to reoffend, they might never reoffend, or at least the recidivism is low. But pedophilic child sex offenders are much more complex to treat, and because they have an inherent, almost this urge to have sex, they have sexual interest toward children. So what you are doing, the treatment should then be directed for them to not look at children as their sexual preference, which is much more difficult actually to accomplish.
The offenders that were studied in your case were men that were mostly from low-income jobs. So, to what extent do you believe that economic hardship contributes to their criminal behavior? And, is it a sufficient explanation?
No, it's not, because how many men are out there that don't have jobs? It's not. And that's why the study pointed out that there need to be other factors that are present. One of the factors you need to be criminally inclined, and that's having criminal mind in order for you to resolve to raping a child. But secondly, also, you need an opportunity to raping the child. Sometimes some people, when these two factors are combined, they are more likely to commit a crime. So we shouldn't, I don't want to mislead anybody to think just because you have got low level of education, you are likely to. All the other, to make a criminal, there should be a combination of right factors.
Right. You also mentioned, Doctor, that antisocial cognitions and opportunity are critical for the abuse to occur. So how can communities or institutions, intervene early to disrupt this combination before it leads to abuse?
What we need to do is that I think many times we wait, especially as African cultures, we wait to look at consequences of actions, but we don't realize how every day in our lives we breed criminality. When we have kids that are sexually abused and then we put it under our pillow so we don't talk about it, we don't report cases to the police. How do these people deal? How do they process the trauma? What we need to realize is that today's victim is potentially tomorrow's perpetrator. So treating victim is very key, very, very key to preventing tomorrow's perpetrator. So it's also very important for us to have an education system that caters to different mindsets and to different learning abilities. I mean, human beings have got different talents. Those kids with dyslexia, there are kids with, and sometimes in our system, we can't cater to people who cannot strive in the normal traditional stream. And that works against us because then these kids drop out of school, they feel inferior. Years later, they become criminal. So having really integrated education system is also key to addressing our criminal issues.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, some cases of abuse, Doctor, escalates to murder and were excluded from your study. But how do these offenders differ psychologically from non-lethal offenders? And what does that tell us about the spectrum of danger that they pose?
Yes, because if we have to look at the study look at child sex offender, it didn't look at child sex offender who escalated to murder. These are totally two different categories. An escalation to murder could be an indication of another psychological condition, which could be more severe a side of antisocial personality or more psychopathic traits or paraphilias. So those are that's among other more serious criminal disorders that are totally different from child sex offenders who just sexually abuse and then they don't escalate to murder. Yeah, in that case. So these two categories need different treatments because, as I've indicated, the one only display one psychological disorder. the other one possibly display coexisting personality disorder. So effective treatment should target both in order for this offender to be adequately treated.
Thank you. Well, Namibia, like many countries, struggles, of course, with limited resources. So based on your findings, what are the top 3 urgent interventions you would recommend to the government and stakeholders, to combat child sexual abuse effectively?
Okay. I would look at research. I really think one of the things that it's not doing us justice in Africa is that we are not relying on research. Research helps us. Like if we look at the concept of criminal profile, in order for you to understand a perpetrator who you don't know, you need to understand the known perpetrator. They will lead you to the unknown perpetrator. So if you don't have research, in order for you to understand that population, you have a hard time solving new cases of the ones that are coming up. So it's actually very critical for us to do research, really to understand who are these men, everything that we could possibly know about this offender population. Secondly, I think we need to look at systematic issues that are addressing that actually cause offending, and I'll emphasize again the issue of treating childhood traumas. We really need to have system in place that treat our childhood traumas. And then we have to have an education system and then education system that is comprehensive, that takes care of different learning styles. And then we need to improve our prospects for employment. Currently, I would think, yeah.
Yes, doctor, please continue. We just have one last question that we'd like to pose to you.
No, it's okay. I would think that currently, if we look at all the social factors that Namibia suffers, Namibia is it's like a fertile ground for criminality. We've got all the right ingredients for crime to actually prosper.
Doctor, just in conclusion, your work calls for collaboration amongst policy makers, researchers, and law enforcement. But from your experience, what are the biggest obstacles to achieving this collaboration, and how can it be overcome?
I think maybe there is no much political, I don't know if there is a political push. There should be a body that is actually facilitating and ensuring that research that is being done by academics is solving social problems. We can't just be doing research just for the sake of doing research. And that would mean government needs to fund, to actually encourage people to tap into certain research that will answer to our social problem. But that would also mean that government should be ready to respond to the results of the research. So it actually saves no point for us to do research, but you don't believe in the outcome of the research, or that you're not doing anything about it.
Well, Dr. Nafuka, very lovely discussion with you this evening. We do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Roundup.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to take a brief break now. When we come back, our conversations continue. Stay with us.